Actually, cosmic consciousness is something that we cannot rationally conceive. If we can achieve to it at all, it can only be by a direct experience of consciousness, which might be termed a mystical experience. But this mystical experience available to man could only be one of the lesser reflections of the great pattern itself. Cosmic consciousness cannot be directly experienced. It can only be symbolically experienced through the contemplation of the cosmos. In other words, if there is anywhere a form capable of bringing the cosmic consciousness within the conception of man, that form is the cosmos. This is the great mandala. This is the universal symbol by which man may sense but not understand the measure of the universal consciousness itself. Man may recognize aspects of it, but he cannot possibly experience the totality of that experience which projects worlds into existence. Science is divided, philosophy has been divided at times, as to the nature of this consciousness. Some skeptics have said, are we simply fooling ourselves? Is this so-called cosmic consciousness merely a term that we have invented to explain a mechanism that we cannot understand? The question to them, of course, is, does the universe require this basic consciousness? Does it require anything except a perpetual motion machine? An instrumentality which can propagate itself forever without any need for a sovereign intellect. This is a persuasive argument inasmuch as it also makes further thinking on the subject unnecessary, and very few people want to think if they can possibly avoid it. But actually it does not solve very much. Cosmic consciousness is a necessity for one reason only: that man is conscious. If there is not some kind of consciousness superior to man, where did his come from? And this offers no solution to the scientific riddle. If the scientist wishes to say that consciousness in man is simply the product of the evolution process, in which he is gradually building instruments capable of producing consciousness, which does not exist until the instrument is available, then the scientist must settle down to try to figure out how many more conscious manifestations have preceded man, and consequently how much superior material is available for the production of consciousness than is found in the constitution of man. If evolution has been forever, in other words, consciousness must have arisen before man, or it could not have arisen in man, just as surely as it must arise in man if it is to arise later in some other form of life. So consciousness, being something we possess, puts us in the same dilemma as the architect who stood looking at the Pyramid of Giza. He shook his head sadly and said, if I hadn't seen it, I would deny its existence. It's just not possible. But having seen it, the architect was on the horns of a dilemma. He could not deny it. This is much the developing position of science. It is no longer possible to categorically deny consciousness unless we wish to affirm that we have a consciousness ourselves capable of denying it in something else. and to assume that we are the only creature in the infinitudes of time which have produced the endless pageantry of the cosmos, that man and man alone has reached the degree by which he can be aware of his own existence. This is a little too arrogant even for the average scientist to contemplate. He is forced to reorganize his thinking. But if we will assume for a moment that this consciousness in things arises from a consciousness in all things, then we can also realize that from this consciousness arose what Pythagoras called the law of mathematical sequences. In other words, consciousness is necessary to produce patterns which can only be evaluated in terms of consciousness. If a pattern is obviously the production of consciousness, can only be discovered by the extension or education of consciousness, then we are dealing with a factor which is difficult to depreciate. We are confronted with the simple inevitable that consciousness itself must be at the root of all these conscious processes which have within themselves a sense of alive value. Mathematics, for example, which with all its phases and all its departments must be regarded as something so profoundly intricate that it could only have been produced by an intellect superior to itself. Man has not even begun to explore the profundities of mathematics. And we cannot say that geometry has evolved by merely tossing together a series of unrelated accidents. Mathematics alone demonstrates the absolute order of existence, and mathematical procedures and processes and instruments used as we have used them in atomic research to carry on beyond the power of the human mind, so that we have to depend entirely upon formulas which operate although they cannot be interpreted in terms of human experience. We have to assume that man in the next 100 years or the next 500 years will penetrate still further into the mystery of mathematics. To do this, he must use his conscious faculties, and he can gain his own knowledge only by the increase of these faculties. We must come to the conclusion then that any problem which consciousness alone can solve, and which solved proves to be an absolutely orderly procedure, that such a process can come into existence itself only by consciousness. There is no other way in which it can come into existence. So we are using consciousness, in a sense, our own consciousness, as a net to capture universal consciousness. If we could capture universal consciousness with plain stubbornness, we would use that. If we could convince ourselves beyond all doubt that there were no universal processes, we would also follow that as a line of least resistance. If we could conquer universal procedure with our appetites, our emotions, or our sensations, we would use those. But we cannot. The only way that we can investigate the universe around us is through the use of the highest faculty that we possess, the conscious mind. The answer has to be that the thing which we are investigating was the production of a mind no less than that which is required to discover it on our part.